What's going on, people? What's really good? It's your boy Marv, and this is the Nerds in the Hood. Appreciate y'all for watching. Something I want to talk about with y'all. Hope y'all day's going well. Before you watch this episode, hope your day's going well after. But there's something I need to talk about. It's been pressing me for a few days, and I was like, I never had a chance to talk about it, and today's the day that I need to talk about it. For those of you who haven't seen, Complex.com, or Complex Magazine rather, either way, it's Complex, no pun intended. They made their Mount Rushmore of Cartoon Network's original shows, right? Now, for those of you who are living under a rock, the Mount Rushmore, this whole Mount Rushmore thing is usually what people use to say the goats of the goats, the best of all time, in terms of any type of entertainment, really. The original Mount Rushmore was used to do that with what they felt was the 4 greatest presidents of all time. I know they picked Washington because he's the first, and I know they picked Lincoln because he got my peoples out. But at the end of the day, that's what this Mount Rushmore thing is used to describe. So you can always say your Mount Rushmore or your top 5, your top 10. Everybody has their own ways of dealing with the greatest of all time. In this case, with a Mount Rushmore, you're also not even ranking them. You're just saying what the 4 is. You're not even ranking them because the Mount Rushmore, the original Mount Rushmore, is not even a ranking. It's just these are the 4 greats. So it's been used heavily in a lot of conversations and discussions. So Complex did one for Cartoon Network's original programming. And here was their 4. They picked Finn, right? Yeah, that's him. Finn from Adventure Time with Finn and Jake. Number 1, Agent Number 1 from Codename Kids Next Door. Samurai Jack. And Courage the Cowardly Dog. Now I know what you're thinking. And I know, like me, you're sitting there going, I don't agree. I really don't agree. Now, I can say this much. If there's one person I would keep on this list, and I know it might get a lot of people upset, it would be Finn. It would be Finn. Finn defined the modern Cartoon Network. Like right now, Cartoon Network, how many TV shows do you really think about? You know what I'm saying? Like how many of those cartoons do you really think about in the 2010s and now in 2020s? Adventure Time is still one of those shows, right? It was what was their ones? Adventure Time, regular show, Teen Titans Go, I think Chowder. Like it was a few of them. Well, Chowder was more 2000s, but anyway, you get what I'm saying. There's only a few of them. There's still now with the Craig of the Creeks and the We Bare Bears and all of that. Steven Universe too, but Adventure Time was the one. Adventure Time was so real, Nickelodeon almost picked it up and they passed on it and then became this greatness of greatness, right? It was one of the first Cartoon Network shows to be used in a fighting game, which was the Multiverses joint. And then other cartoons came later. But that's the only one I would see staying on there. Now, the other 3, maybe Courage, maybe Samurai Jack. I don't think number 1 should be on there. If I had to make my own, this is probably where I would go. I wouldn't put those 3 guys. I wouldn't put those 3 guys on there. I would keep Finn. So Finn's gonna stay, right? Now, there are a few options. Powerpuff Girls being one of them. Some would say Dexter. Some would even say Johnny Bravo, although I would not. And these are gonna be controversial. So outside of Finn, one person I would say is you can use any variation of these people, but since they use number 1 because he was like the main character in a sense of Codename Kids Next Door, I would say, and I know I'm gonna piss a lot of people off, Robin. Now I know what you're thinking. How is it Robin? Robin had not only 1, but he had 2 of the best original shows on Cartoon Network, which was Teen Titans and Teen Titans Go. So in the early to mid 2000s, Teen Titans was very popular and it got like just canceled. It was ahead of its time and it got canceled for some weird reason. And then years later, it came back as a goofy show that people still love. When you look at Cartoon Network original shows, it is, outside of the Powerpuff Girls, the only other show that got its own movie in theaters. It really resonated. Even LeBron James at a press conference, LeBron James, basketball player, he's in an interview and he said, you know what, I'm going to go home, watch some Teen Titans Go. How many athletes you really know be saying that about their cartoons, right? Some athletes will talk about anime. Some athletes will talk about maybe a few other cartoons like SpongeBob. But nobody was talking about Cartoon Network cartoons like that in terms of athletes. And this one guy goes out of his way and says he's going to go home and watch Teen Titans Go. And again, I'm going off of the impact that it had in terms of why I am even tuning into Cartoon Network. I'm a grown man. I watched this show. I laughed really hard. I saw the movie with my nephew. We laughed really hard. So as a kid, when I was younger, as a teenager in high school, I loved the original Teen Titans. And it was a lot darker, obviously, than a cartoon. And then they made another movie that, even though it didn't go to theaters, they made a movie where both of them joined forces to have a good fight. So Teen Titans, to me, should be on this Mount Rushmore because of the impact it had in 2 different decades with 2 different series. So bam. Robin should go up there. Another person that should go up there. And again, this is going to piss people off, but I'm being real. I'm going to say Scooby-Doo. Now, I know what you're thinking. Marv, Scooby-Doo wasn't a Cartoon Network original show. That's where you're wrong. Yes, it did start off as its own show in the 70s or whatever. Yeah, in the 70s. And over time, it had massive shows. And by the 90s, it pretty much died down until, I believe it was 1998. Cartoon Network made its own movie, right? And it was called Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. I'm right, 1998. Now, this movie, I was not sure if it was a Cartoon Network original, but I do know that it went to Cartoon Network. And it was the first of its kind, right? And I tried to look it up, which I'm also looking it up right now, just to make sure that I'm not like talking too crazy. And then people are like, hey, wait a minute, that's not true. I always thought it was one of the first Cartoon Network original films to come on a TV channel, but I don't think I was right. But once that movie came out, Scooby-Doo went on a renaissance. It had 2 live action shows and it had a bunch of original shows that came out of nowhere, from What's New Scooby-Doo to Guess Who Scooby-Doo to What's Crackin' Scooby-Doo, all types of stuff. But a lot of them premiered on Cartoon Network. And during the 2000s, when Cartoon Network was trying to find its footing after losing shows like Dexter's Lab, after losing shows like Johnny Bravo, after losing shows like Courage and the Powerpuff Girls, this franchise came back with a vengeance and still became one of the most popular TV shows on the network. So in a world where Nicktoons was like, oh, all we need is SpongeBob and Avatar, Cartoon Network said, all right, if we could make Scooby-Doo the Scooby-Doo he once was, I think we're still going to be on here. And to this day, Scooby-Doo is probably still coming on. So I know that is a tough thing for some people to want to hear me say, that they're like, yo, you're using this guy? Yes, I am. Speaking of old cartoon characters, this brings me to my next one. Space Ghost. I know, again, a lot of you are going to be mad. Yo, Space Ghost didn't start on Cartoon Network. He didn't. But just like Scooby-Doo, he had a renaissance that none of us saw. And it opened so many doors for Cartoon Network that we have Space Ghost to thank for this. Let me just explain this to you. This is almost like the George Washington in this case. When Cartoon Network first started, it was just a channel that played old cartoons. That was all it was. It played Warner Brothers cartoons. It played Hanna-Barbera cartoons. It played, the only anime it was playing at the time, if anything, was probably Speed Racer and maybe G-Force. But be that as it may, Cartoon Network just was home to old cartoons. That was all it was home to. And then Nickelodeon was home to like live entertainment for kids. And then it started adapting its own Nicktoons. So Nickelodeon started beating Cartoon Network just off of the strength that they didn't really have original shows at the time. They were just playing a whole bunch of old shows. And as a kid in the 90s, that's how you knew about those shows from the 70s and the 80s and the 60s, because of what Cartoon Network did. 1993, they started an attempt at their first original show. I think it was called like the Moxie Show or something. Didn't really work out. 1994, they tried again with a show called Space Ghost Coast to Coast. It was a hybrid show, if you will, because Space Ghost and all the other people were cartoons, and Space Ghost was cartoons, and then the guests were live action people. They were their actual selves, right? And what happened was, as I'm still looking up here to make sure I got this right, the TV show blew up. It was a really fun talk show, and people liked it, right? And it kept working, and it kept working, and it kept working, right? So stay with me on this journey. Space Ghost kept working, and what did Space Ghost do? They opened up a contest that they did for up-and-coming creators of cartoons, right? Animators. And what this was called was, I don't remember what it was called, but I know it ended up being called What a Cartoon later. And then What a Cartoon span off and begat its own series, anthology series of different cartoons. Some of those cartoons later became Dexter's Laboratory, Johnny Bravo. I believe the Powerpuff Girls was one of them, and I think Courage the Cowardly Dog was one of them. Cow and Chicken was one of them, and a whole lot of other shows that some did and some didn't work out later in time, right? One other such show that came on there, a quick cartoon, was called The Adventures of Larry and Steve, about a talking dog who was in the pound, was about to get taken out until he met a guy named Steve, right? Was that? Or was it Larry? Either way, dog meets human. Human is an idiot. They go on his crazy adventures, and he realizes this is going to be his friend for the rest of his life. That cartoon was created by a man named Seth MacFarlane. It didn't work out on Cartoon Network. And then years later, he turned that same idea into Family Guy. Space Ghost Coast to Coast technically had an indirect presence because that show got on the air and he was able to turn it into Family Guy. Years later, after Space Ghost Coast to Coast premiered, they had another cartoon block that spun off because of that. And they used one of the villains named Motar, who was on Space Ghost Coast to Coast, right? Motar was like the production engineer for the show of Space Ghost Coast to Coast, and somehow became the host of a programming block that came on in the afternoons to just showcase action cartoons. What was that programming block called? Toonami. He was the first and original host before we got Tom the Robot. Time progressed again, and then they said, Space Ghost Coast to Coast is too much of an adult show. It's too many, like, grown-up stars. You're not getting kids like Kenan Thompson. You're not getting little kids like Michelle Trachtenberg when she was a kid, rest her soul. You're not getting kids like that. We're getting adults like the Macho Man Randy Savage and Weird Al Yankovic and other big-time adult stars. Maybe we should put this on a programming block late at night where adults can just see this. Henceforth, Adult Swim was born, based off of the actions of Space Ghost Coast to Coast. And then what did we get from that show? A show called The Zorak Show. No, it was The Brack Show, excuse me. Show called The Brack Show, which in itself was funny. And then they brought Space Ghost back just for brief moments, but it worked itself out. So because of Space Ghost, we got a bunch of dope original content. We also got Adult Swim. We technically got Family Guy, and we got Toonami, all because of Space Ghost Coast to Coast success. So that is why I feel that the Mount Rushmore should be Space Ghost, Scooby-Doo, Finn, and Robin. If anybody else you should replace on there, if you wanted to replace maybe Robin because he's not fully a Cartoon Network original, maybe you can go ahead and use maybe one of the Powerpuff Girls because of the impact they had on Cartoon Network, also being one of the first theatrical films to ever be a part of Cartoon Network. A lot of people say Dexter. Dexter is a close runner-up. Courage is also a close runner-up too. Samurai Jack is, but yeah, you could probably go with those. But a lot of people are going to write things like Bugs Bunny. A lot of people are going to write things like Superman or Batman or something like that. And that's not what this was about. This was about who made the most impact to Cartoon Network's success. And that is why I gave you this whole long story with Space Ghost. But I feel that if anybody makes a Mount Rushmore list, he should be on there because his show directly impacted how we watch Cartoon Network now. We probably wouldn't have had a Toonami had it not been for Space Ghost. Maybe. We probably still would have. But it started because it was a spinoff of Space Ghost Coast to Coast with Motar. Adult Swim was branched out because of that. And then we got the Brack Show, and the Brack Show was pretty funny, not gonna hold you. And I think they did another one. I think it was called Cartoon Planet too. I don't know if that was Adult Swim or not, but either way, Space Ghost is the reason for most of what we have here. It really is. I'm being honest. So I think that those people should make this Mount Rushmore list. I also think there should be a Nickelodeon one, but I'm going to do that one on my own another time. That's another episode. But anyway, this has been... I think let me look and see. Did I talk? Yeah, 15 minutes. That's not crazy. But anyway, I could go longer. I can go on, but I'm not going to, because I feel like that's good enough right there. Like I said, if there was anybody that probably should be switched, maybe Ben 10 probably should be on there. Or if you had like a team like that, like, you know what I'm saying? Like if you see how the NBA does their 75, they did a 75th anniversary, and they had the 75 best players. You can do that with Cartoon Network, right? And choose the best characters from the shows they had. Some people might throw on Mike, Lou, and Og. Some people might throw on Squirrel Boy, or my gym partner's a monkey. I didn't hate Class of 3000. That one was cool. But I'm just saying that to say there's a lot of shows that Cartoon Network made that were great. And there's some that were just the best of the best. But when I go off of the ones that made the most impact to why you watch Cartoon Network and what helped make Cartoon Network the best it could be, that is why. The same reason, or I hope it's the same reason, there is an actual Mount Rushmore for presidents. Because you go by the first ever president, the president that changed the course of history when he freed the slaves, stuff of that nature. That is why they're on there. And that is why people always laugh and they go, oh, hopefully years later they put like Obama on there or something like that, which I'm all for it, but I know it probably won't happen. So, but never say never. But I'm saying that to say that when you make these Mount Rushmores, people, when you're arguing these, you don't argue off of what do you feel was your favorite show, because that's your favorite show. This is my opinion, but it's still based off of who made the most impact. And I guess for people that it's also true, because you're going off of who made the most impact for you when you were younger, who made you watch the network, right? But if you're going off of original shows and original programming, that's where you should go for. Again, Scooby-Doo had his own thing before he got to Cartoon Network. But when he got to Cartoon Network, he said, you know what, I like it here. I'm going to make this my own, and made a bunch of cartoons. But if you don't feel Scooby-Doo should be on there, then yeah, I would say a great replacement would either be one of the Powerpuff Girls, Ben Tennyson, maybe the regular show, or maybe Dexter. Like one of those, right? But yeah, man. It's just what it is. That's the impact of what Cartoon Network did. And Cartoon Network, I tip my hat off to you for many a years of just greatness that you did for me and my childhood. Anyway, it's your boy Marv Lat signing off. Go ahead in the comments and put your Mount Rushmore. Put what cartoons you think should be it. Let's talk about it. I went full nerd on this one. So I want to see the answers. I want to see people say that's wrong. But go ahead and look back at Toonami and tell me Motar was not the first host. I dare you, because I remember the old Toonami when it was shows like The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest and SWAT Cats, and the only anime again was like G-Force and stuff. And they were just using really adventure-based cartoons, Thundercats, stuff like that. And then they decided, we should get anime on here. And then they got Dragon Ball Z. They went and grabbed Yu Yu Hakusho from Adult Swim and put it on Toonami. And then Toonami became what it is today, now another branch of Adult Swim. So we can see more mostly uncut cartoons from anime. Anyway, I'm going to get up out of here. Follow on social media. Check the link tree in the description. I'm going to keep it going, y'all. Another episode of Nerds in the Hood. Peace.